Tazral dusted off the small metal object, his four-fingered hands working carefully. The artifact glinted under the bright lights of his laboratory. As the leading xenorchaeologist of the Mithrid species, he had seen many strange things, but this was different. Recording analysis, he spoke into his data device. Object appears to be manufactured, approximately 1,200 cycles old. Material composition unknown in our records. The object was small, just larger than his palm. It had strange markings on it, symbols that matched no known language in the Galactic Consortium's vast archives. But one symbol caught his attention. The blue circle with green patches and white swirls. It matched descriptions from the old stories. Stories of humans. Tazral's skin rippled with excitement, changing from its normal purple to a bright orange. Most scholars in the consortium believed humans were just myths, scary stories told to young ones. Legends said humans were unpredictable, adaptable, and dangerously clever. They supposedly came from a blue world called Earth, but no such planet had ever been found. "Professor, the council is waiting," his assistant Mealcore called from the doorway. "Your presentation begins in 10 minutes. Tazral carefully packed the artifact. Today was important. After 20 years of research, he was finally presenting his controversial findings to the Galactic Symposium. Many would laugh at him, but the evidence was too strong to ignore. The Great Hall was packed with representatives from all 12 species of the consortium. Scholars, military leaders, and politicians filled the seats. At the center sat High Counselor Ziv-Tan, her long neck and 6 eyes marking her as a member of the ancient Seelie race. "Distinguished colleagues," Tazral began, his voice steady despite his nervousness. "For centuries, we have dismissed humans as mere legends. Today, I present evidence that they were real." Murmurs filled the room. Some laughed quietly. "These artifacts contain technology we still cannot fully understand. They match precisely the descriptions in our oldest historical texts." He showed images of his discoveries, strange tools, pieces of technology, and finally, the blue world symbol. "I believe humans did exist. They visited our worlds long ago, perhaps even helped form the early consortium, then disappeared." High Counselor Ziv-Tan leaned forward. "Professor Tazral, while your research is detailed, where would these humans be now? If such a powerful species existed, why would they simply vanish?" Before he could answer, the emergency alert system activated. Red lights flashed, and a deep tone echoed through the hall. Admiral Vorntek rushed onto the stage, his military uniform marking him as head of Consortium Defense. "High Counselor, sensors have detected an unknown fleet entering Consortium space. 57 ships of unknown design." The room erupted in panic. "Show us," ordered Ziv-Tan. The large screen displayed the incoming fleet, sleek ships unlike any consortium design. They moved in perfect formation, bypassing the outer defense grid as if it wasn't there. Tazral stared at the screen, his skin now pale blue with shock. The lead ship bore a familiar symbol, a blue circle with green patches and white swirls. "Impossible," whispered Admiral Vorntek. But Tazral knew better. "No," he said quietly, "not impossible. They're back." The legends had returned. Chaos erupted in the Great Hall. Representatives from all 12 species shouted questions and demands. Silence. High Counselor Ziv-Tan's voice cut through the noise. "Admiral Vorntek, what is our defense status?" The Admiral's face darkened. "The unknown fleet has bypassed our outer defenses without firing a single shot. They knew exactly where our sensor blind spots were." "Impossible," someone shouted. "Those are military secrets." Tazral stepped forward, his curiosity overcoming his fear. "May I see the ship designs more closely?" The main screen zoomed in on the lead vessel. Its smooth, curved hull gleamed against the darkness of space. Strange markings decorated its side, symbols that matched those on the artifacts Tazral had studied for years. "Those markings," he whispered. "They're identical to what we found in the ruins on Xelor 7. His forefingers traced the patterns in the air. These aren't just any ships. They're human ships. Commander Vex Lore, the head of the consortium military forces, pushed through the crowd. His tall, muscular frame and gray, scaly skin marked him as a member of the warrior Drax species. "I've ordered our defense fleet into position," he announced. "We have 200 ships surrounding the incoming fleet." "Don't attack," Tazral pleaded. "If these really are humans, we should try to communicate first." Vexlor sneered. "If your humans are real, then according to our own legends, they are dangerous and unpredictable. I will not risk consortium lives on fairy tales." Suddenly, the communication system activated. The large screen flickered, and a new image appeared. The beam on screen looked strange to everyone in the hall. It had no scales, no tentacles, no extra limbs, just smooth skin, 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head of dark fur. Its face featured 2 forward-facing eyes, a small nose, and a mouth. It wore a dark uniform with shiny objects on its shoulders. "This is Admiral Helena Chen of the United Earth Fleet," the being spoke, its voice translated by the consortium systems. "We come in peace and seek diplomatic relations with the Galactic Consortium." Stunned silence filled the hall. The legends were real. Humans existed. Vexlor recovered first. "How do you know about the consortium? How did you bypass our defenses?" Admiral Chen smiled, a gesture that made several consortium members flinch. "We've been here before, Commander. A long time ago. We helped build those defenses." High Counselor Zivten moved toward the screen. "If that's true, where have you been for the past millennium? Why return now?" "We had to leave due to a grave threat," Chen replied, her expression growing serious. "And now we've returned because that same threat is coming back. The swarm is returning to this sector, and we've come to warn you." Tazral felt his skin turn white with shock. The swarm was another legend, a devouring enemy that supposedly threatened all life in the galaxy ages ago. "We request permission to dock at your central station," continued Admiral Chen. "There is much to discuss, and not much time." Vexlor shook his head. This could be a trick. But Tazral knew better. The artifacts, the symbols, the ancient texts, they all pointed to this moment. "We should listen," he said quietly. "The legends also say humans once saved us all." Tazral had never been on a military ship before. The consortium vessel hummed quietly as it approached the human flagship. Beside him, Commander Vexlor stood stiffly, his hand resting on his weapon. "I still think this is a mistake," Vexlor muttered. "We're walking right into their trap." High Counselor Zivtan, who led their small delegation, turned all 6 of her eyes toward him. "We need information, Commander. If humans are real, and if this swarm is returning, we must know." The shuttle docked with a gentle thud. The airlock door slid open, revealing a brightly lit corridor. A small group of humans waited for them. Tazral stared in fascination. Up close, humans were even stranger than they appeared on screen. Their skin came in different colors, from pale pink to deep brown. Some had fur on their heads in various colors and lengths. They all wore the same dark uniforms with different colored stripes and symbols. Admiral Helena Chen stepped forward. She was shorter than Vexlor, but stood with the same confidence. "Welcome aboard the UES Horizon. Thank you for accepting our invitation." "We have many questions," said Zivtan. Chen nodded. "And we have answers. Please, follow me." They walked through corridors filled with technology that made even the consortium's best engineers in the delegation whisper in amazement. Transparent screens floated in midair. Doors opened without touch. Gravity seemed to shift subtly in different sections. They entered a large room with a round table. On one wall, a massive window showed the stars and the consortium ship's position nearby. "Please be seated," Chen said. "I know this must be shocking for you. According to our records, it's been 1,000 238 years since humans had contact with the consortium. If you're really humans, Vexlore interrupted. Prove it. Our legends speak of certain abilities. Chen smiled. Like our adaptability, or our tendency to form bonds with other species. She pressed a button on the table. Perhaps this will help. A three-dimensional image appeared above the table. An ancient recording. It showed humans and various consortium species working together, building structures, fighting side by side against strange, insect-like creatures. This was recorded during the First Swarm War, Chen explained. Humans and the early consortium species formed an alliance to push back the swarm, a hive mind species that consumes everything in its path. Tazral leaned forward, his skin turning bright yellow with excitement. These match the carvings I found in the ruins. But how did humans survive for so long? Our species lived for centuries, but humans. Cryosuspension, answered a new human who entered the room. This one was female, smaller than Chen, with long dark fur on her head. I'm Elisa Mori, diplomatic officer. While traveling between star systems, we sleep in special chambers that slow our aging process. She placed a small device on the table. It projected the image of a massive ship, far larger than even their flagship. This is an Orc ship, she explained. After the First Swarm War, we built these to evacuate this sector when we realized the swarm would return in greater numbers. We've spent centuries developing technology to fight them, and now they're coming back, Chen said gravely. Our long-range sensors detected their approach 3 years ago. We've come to warn you and to help, if you'll accept it. Vexlore frowned. Why should we trust you? You abandoned this sector once. To survive, Chen replied calmly. So we could return stronger. Earth fell during the evacuation, Commander. We lost our homeworld to save as many as we could. Silence filled the room. Even Vexlore had no response to that. The Consortium Council chamber was filled to capacity. Representatives from all 12 species gathered to debate the human warning about the swarm. The room buzzed with nervous energy. They offer no proof, shouted Councillor Grex, his tentacles waving angrily. These humans appear after more than 1,000 years with tales of doom, and we're supposed to just believe them. Vexlore stood at attention beside the council table. I agree. This could be a trick to gain our trust before they attack. High Councillor Zibtan raised her hand for silence. We must consider all possibilities. Professor Tazral, you've studied our oldest records. What do they say about this swarm? Tazral stepped forward, carrying a stack of data tablets. His skin had settled into a deep blue of concentration. After meeting the humans, I searched our deepest archives, he explained. I found records that had been sealed for centuries. They speak of a terrible enemy that came from beyond our galaxy. The records call them the Devourers, but their description matches what the humans call the swarm. He displayed ancient images on the main screen. They showed strange insect-like creatures with multiple limbs and sharp teeth. The images showed entire planets stripped bare of all life and resources. According to these records, Tazral continued, this enemy was defeated by the Firebringers from the Blue World who sacrificed greatly to push them back. The Firebringers, whispered Zibtan. Humans. Vexlore shook his head. Even if this is true, why should we trust them now? They abandoned us before. The chamber doors opened, and Elisa Mori entered with 2 other humans. The room fell silent. We didn't abandon you, Elisa said calmly. We retreated to gather strength, to develop technology that could defeat the swarm permanently. She placed a small device on the council table. It projected a 3-dimensional star map of the entire sector. The swarm operates as a hive mind. They consume everything. Living beings, technology, even energy itself. They grow stronger with everything they devour, she explained. Last time, we only pushed them back temporarily. One of the other humans, a tall male with dark skin, stepped forward. I'm Lieutenant Commander Jackson. Our long-range sensors have detected quantum disturbances at these points. He pointed to several areas at the edge of the map. These are early signs of the swarm's approach. Convenient that only your sensors can detect them, Vexlor muttered. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the chamber, Tazral and Eliza had stepped away from the main debate. Your people's history has been forgotten, Eliza said softly. The records of our alliance were probably lost during the Great Migration. Tazral nodded. Many of our oldest archives were damaged or destroyed. We lost much knowledge. We humans have a saying, Eliza smiled. Those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. A wise saying, Tazral replied. I believe you, Eliza. The artifacts I've studied match your technology too perfectly to be coincidence. Their conversation was interrupted by a loud alarm. Red emergency lights flashed throughout the chamber. Priority message from Outpost 7, shouted a communication officer. They're under attack. The main screen changed to show a small consortium space station. A dark, oddly shaped ship was approaching it. That's not one of ours, Vexlor said, his voice suddenly uncertain. No, Admiral Chen replied from the doorway, her face grim. It's a swarm scout ship. They're here. The council chamber erupted into chaos. On the main screen, the strange ship approached Outpost 7 with frightening speed. Evacuate the outpost, ordered Zivtan. How long until our defensive fleet can reach them? 2 hours at maximum speed. A military officer replied, his voice shaking. Admiral Chen stepped forward. We have ships nearby. They can be there in 15 minutes. Vexlor hesitated, then nodded sharply. Do it. Chen touched a small device on her wrist. This is Admiral Chen. Raven Squadron. Intercept the swarm scout at Outpost 7. Authorization. Earth Prime Delta. The screen split to show 4 human ships changing course, engines flaring bright blue as they accelerated toward the outpost. Everyone, follow me to the command center, Zivtan ordered. We need to see this. The command center was the heart of consortium defense operations. Massive screens covered the walls, showing star maps and ship positions. Officers from various species worked at control stations, their voices tense. Tazral found himself standing next to Eliza Mori. Will your ships be in time? He asked quietly. They'll make it, she replied. But this is just the beginning. A scout ship means the main swarm is close behind. On the main screen, they watched as the human ships approached Outpost 7. The swarm scout had already attached itself to one section of the station, its dark, organic-looking hull pulsing strangely. Magnify that area, Chen instructed. The image zoomed in to show the scout ship melting into the station's hull, tendrils of dark material spreading like roots through the metal. It's consuming the station, Eliza explained. Converting matter into energy and information. It's learning about your technology. Raven Squadron in position, announced a voice over the communication system. 4 sleek human ships surrounded the scout. They were smaller than consortium ships, but moved with incredible precision. Target locked, reported the squadron leader, deploying quantum disruptors. Each human ship fired a beam of blue-white energy. Where the beams hit the swarm ship, its hull began to break apart, the dark material dissolving. What weapons are those? Asked Vexlor, his eyes wide. Nothing in our arsenal could do that. Quantum disruptors, Chen explained. They break the molecular bonds that the swarm uses to maintain their hive-mind connection. The swarm scout convulsed, then detached from the station. It tried to flee, but the human ships pursued relentlessly, firing again and again until the scout disintegrated into floating debris. A cheer went up from the consortium officers, but Chen's face remained grim. It sent a signal before it died, she said. They know we're here now. How can you be sure? Asked Zivtan. Chen nodded to one of her officers, who displayed a graph of energy readings. This spike here, it's a quantum transmission. The main swarm now knows that humans have returned to this sector, and that we still have the weapons to hurt them. Vexilor stepped closer to the display, his earlier suspicion replaced by grim understanding. "How long do we have?" "Days, maybe a week," Chen replied. "The main force will come, and it will come quickly." "Then we need to prepare," said Zivtan. She turned to face the entire command center. "As of this moment, the consortium is on high alert, and we accept the humans' offer of alliance." She extended her long, six-fingered hand to Admiral Chen, who clasped it firmly. "Together," Chen said, like before. 5 days after the scout ship's destruction, the first wave of the swarm arrived. 3 massive ships, each twice the size of the largest consortium cruiser, appeared near Viridian, an important agricultural world. In the Joint Command Center, alarms blared as the swarm ships were detected. "All ships, battle positions," ordered Vexilor. "Protect the evacuation transports at all costs." On Viridian, thousands of civilians rushed to board evacuation ships. The planet was home to nearly 2 million consortium citizens from various species. Admiral Chen studied the tactical display. "The swarm is targeting food production centers first. They'll consume the biomass and use it to create more of their kind. Our defense fleet is in position," reported a consortium officer. 27 ships forming a blockade. Tazral watched nervously from a corner of the command center. As a scientist, not a soldier, he had no official role here, but Zivtan had requested his presence due to his knowledge of the ancient records. "The defense system on Viridian is one of our strongest," Vexilor said confidently. "Their shields can." He stopped mid-sentence as the display showed the swarm ships firing strange, pulsing projectiles. When they hit the consortium defensive shield, they didn't explode. Instead, they seemed to melt through it like acid through paper. "They've adapted," Chen said grimly. "They analyzed your shield technology from the scout ship's data." "Our ships are engaging," reported the communications officer. The consortium fleet fired their energy weapons at the swarm ships. Their shots caused damage, but the swarm hulls seemed to repair themselves almost immediately. "This isn't working," Vexilor admitted, his voice tight with frustration. Chen nodded to her communications officer. "Deploy the Earth Fleet, Combat Formation Delta." 15 human ships emerged from hyperspace directly behind the swarm vessels. They were smaller than the consortium ships but moved with incredible speed and coordination. "Target their central nodes," ordered Chen. "Fire quantum disruptors and gravity bombs." The battle that followed was unlike anything the consortium had ever seen. The human ships darted between the massive swarm vessels, firing precisely at specific points. Where their weapons hit, the swarm ships' self-healing ability failed. "They're targeting the neural pathways," Elizet explained to Tazral, "cutting off the hive mind's control." One of the swarm ships broke through the defense line and headed toward a civilian transport carrying hundreds of evacuees. The transport was slow, unable to outrun the swarm vessel. "Transport 12 is in danger," shouted a consortium officer. A human ship, call sign Defender, changed course immediately. It placed itself between the swarm ship and the transport. "Defender, what are you doing?" Chen demanded. "Buying them time, Admiral," came the calm reply. "Transport 12, get those people clear. We'll hold it off." The human ship fired all its weapons at the swarm vessel, causing significant damage but taking heavy fire in return. Its shields failed, hull breaches appeared, but it continued fighting. The transport escaped to safety just as the Defender systems began to fail. "We can't hold on much longer," reported the Defender's captain. "Permission to engage final protocol." Chen's face was stone, but her voice wavered slightly. "Permission granted, Captain. Earth remembers." The Defender accelerated directly toward the damaged swarm ship. In its final moments, it detonated its reactor core, destroying both itself and the swarm vessel in a blinding explosion. Silence fell across the command center. Then Vexilor, the once suspicious commander, bowed his head in respect. "They sacrificed themselves for our people," he said quietly. 2 days after the battle at Viridian, Human and consortium leaders gathered in the newly established Joint Command Center. Maps, screens, and holographic displays covered the walls, showing the positions of both Allied forces and known swarm activity. Vexlor stood before a tactical display, addressing the gathered officers. The swarm has established footholds in these 3 systems. Our standard tactics are not working. They adapt too quickly to our weapons and shields. Admiral Chen nodded. That's how they operate. The swarm learns from every encounter. We need to change our approach. A tall human with dark skin and sharp eyes stepped forward. I'm Captain Ramirez, tactical specialist. The consortium's defensive strategy is too predictable. You form blockades, create defensive lines, and wait for the enemy to attack. Several consortium officers bristled at his criticism. Our defensive formations have protected our worlds for centuries, argued General Thrix, his scaled skin flushing red with anger. Against conventional enemies, yes, Ramirez replied calmly. But the swarm isn't conventional. They don't think like we do. They don't value individual lives. Each drone is expendable. He manipulated the holographic display, showing recordings of previous battles. See how they sacrifice their smaller ships. They're gathering data on our weapons, finding weaknesses. So what do you suggest? Asked Vexlor, his tone cautious but respectful. Asymmetric warfare, Ramirez said. Hit and run attacks. Target their communication nodes. Strike where they don't expect us. The consortium generals looked confused. You mean, not protect our worlds? Asked General Thrix. I mean protect them by striking the swarm before they can attack, Ramirez explained. We form small, fast-moving task forces, mixed human and consortium ships. We hit their supply lines, disrupt their coordination, then disappear before they can adapt. While the military leaders debated strategy, Tazral and Eliza worked in a quieter corner of the center. They had been tasked with searching historical records for any information that might help against the swarm. Look at this, Tazral said excitedly, his skin turning bright yellow. These ruins on Xenderi 4 match the patterns in your human records. Eliza studied the images. These aren't just ruins. These are quantum resonators. She pulled up human historical files, showing similar structures on other worlds. During the first Swarm War, humans built a network of these devices across the sector. They disrupted the swarm's hive mind communication. Tazral's eyes widened. You mean these structures still exist? On our worlds? Some of them must, Eliza replied. They were built to last millennia. They rushed to Admiral Chen and Vexlor with their discovery. If these resonators still exist, Chen said, studying the data, we might be able to reactivate the network. It wouldn't destroy the swarm, but it would weaken them significantly. I'll authorize archaeological teams to locate these structures immediately, Vexlor said. As they prepared to leave, a junior officer rushed in. Command, we've detected a massive swarm fleet gathering at the edge of the sector. Hundreds of ships, all heading this way. Admiral Chen's face grew grim. How long do we have? 3 days, maybe 4. Chen turned to Vexlor. We need to find those resonators. Now. Vexlor nodded, and we need to prepare for the largest battle this sector has seen in over 1,000 years. For the first time, real fear showed in his eyes. But there was determination there too. Human and consortium, now united against a common enemy. Time was running out. All across consortium space, mixed teams of humans and aliens raced to find and reactivate the ancient resonator network. Tazral led one such team on Xenderi 4, working alongside Eliza and a group of engineers. According to these readings, the main control node should be just ahead, Tazral said, checking his scanner as they moved through a dense jungle. Ancient ruins rose around them, half buried by centuries of plant growth. Eliza brushed away vines from a stone panel covered in faded symbols. This is it, human writing from the first Swarm War era. As their team worked to uncover the ancient technology, Similar scenes played out on 7 other consortium worlds. Admiral Chen and Vex Lore coordinated the efforts from the Joint Command Center, racing against the approaching swarm fleet. Resonator team on Bexar-2 reports success, announced a communications officer. The device is powering up. Chen nodded. That's 3 active now. We need at least 5 to create an effective disruption field. Vexilor studied the tactical display showing the massive swarm fleet's approach. We've got less than 20 hours before they reach our defensive line. Suddenly, alarms blared through the command center. Security breach in Section 7, shouted a security officer. We have intruders. Armed guards rushed to respond, but explosions rocked the station. Through the smoke, strange figures appeared. Consortium citizens with blank eyes and strange, mechanical implants covering parts of their bodies. Swarm infiltrators, Chen said grimly. They've taken over some of our people. The controlled citizens attacked with surprising strength, targeting communication systems and power nodes. They're trying to cut off our coordination with the Resonator teams, Vexlor realized. He grabbed a weapon and joined the defense. Protect the command systems. As chaos erupted in the command center, Tazral's team on Senduri 4 made a breakthrough. I think I've got it, Elisa said, connecting human technology to the ancient device. The resonator hummed to life, its central crystal glowing with blue energy. Tazral's scanner showed energy readings spiking. It's working. Now we just need tow. An explosion knocked them both to the ground. Through the dust, they saw 3 consortium citizens approaching, their eyes empty, their movements jerky and unnatural. Swarm-controlled, Elisa whispered. They followed us here. Back at the command center, Chen and Vexilor fought side by side against the infiltrators. A controlled citizen lunged at Chen with a blade, but Vexilor pushed her aside, taking a deep cut to his arm. Why? She asked, helping him take cover as human security officers eliminated the threat. You saved my people at Viridian, he replied, wincing as a medic treated his wound. Besides, we need you alive to win this war. The attack was finally contained, but damage had been done. Communications with 3 Resonator teams, including Tazral's, had been cut off. Status report, Chen demanded. 4 Resonators active, reported an officer. But we've lost contact with the teams on Senduri 4, Lorix Prime, and Kel 5. As if on cue, the tactical display updated with new information. The swarm fleet had accelerated. They would reach consortium space in just 8 hours. They know what we're doing, Vexlor said quietly. They're rushing to stop us. Chen's face was determined as she turned to her officers. Prepare all ships for battle, and keep trying to reach those teams. Our last hope may rest with Tazral and Elisa. On Senduri 4, Tazral and Elisa fought desperately against the swarm-controlled citizens. They had barricaded themselves in the ancient control room with the resonator, which hummed with increasing power. Communications are still down, Elisa said, trying again to contact the command center. We need to complete the activation sequence. Tazral worked frantically at the control panel. The system needs a specific code. These symbols match writings I found years ago, but I never understood their meaning. Eliza studied the ancient text. It's an old Earth language. It says, to those who follow, the key is in the stars we shared. Her eyes widened with realization. Tazral, what constellations were important to both humans and your ancestors? Understanding dawned on his face. The 7 guardians. It appears in both our oldest star maps. He quickly entered the pattern of the constellation. The resonator crystal pulsed brighter, then stabilized into a steady blue glow. It's working, Elisa exclaimed. Now we just need tow. The barricade crashed open. More swarm-controlled citizens poured in, too many to fight off. Get behind me, Elisa said, drawing her weapon. Meanwhile, in space, the largest battle in 1,000 years had begun. The swarm fleet, hundreds of ships strong, crashed against the combined human consortium defense force. From the command ship, Admiral Chen and Vexilor directed the battle. Despite their best tactics, the sheer numbers of the swarm were overwhelming their defenses. "We've lost Delta Squadron," reported an officer. "The swarm has adapted to our quantum disruptors." Chen studied the tactical display grimly. "Without that resonator network fully operational, we can't break their coordination." A communications officer suddenly straightened. "Admiral, we're receiving a signal from Senderi 4. "Put it through," ordered Chen. Eliza's voice came through, broken by static. "Command, resonator active, but we're overrun. Can't hold position much longer." "That's 5 resonators active," Vexilor said. "We can activate the network now." Chen hesitated. "Eliza, what's your situation?" "Swarm forces. Too many," came the reply. "Tazral is wounded. But we found something else. The resonators, they're not just disruptors. According to the ancient data, they can create a feedback loop. Target the swarm's central command ship. A feedback loop would require someone to manually maintain the connection." Chen realized. "You'd be." "We know," Eliza interrupted. "It's our choice, Admiral, for both our peoples." Chen closed her eyes briefly, then nodded. "Understood. Prepare the network." She turned to Vexilor. "We need to identify and target the swarm's command ship. It will be at the center of their formation, protected by their strongest forces." "That's suicide," Vexilor said. "No ship could get close enough to." "Mine can," Chen said quietly. She opened a channel to her fleet. "This is Admiral Chen. I'm taking command of Strike Force Alpha. We're going to open a path to the swarm command ship." The battlefield shifted as human ships formed a spear-like formation, with Chen's flagship at the point. "All resonator stations," Chen broadcast. "Prepare for network activation on my mark." Chen looked at Vexilor. "If this works, the feedback will disrupt their entire hive mind. The swarm ships will become disorganized. And if it doesn't?" Chen's smile was sad but determined. "Then remember what we did here. And be ready when humanity returns again." Her flagship accelerated toward the heart of the swarm fleet, 12 smaller ships forming a protective barrier around it. 1 year after the Great Battle, representatives from all consortium species gathered on the central world of Sileria. The massive hall was decorated with symbols of both the consortium and humanity. At the center stood a monument, a stone pillar with 12 sides, one for each consortium species, and a 13th for humans. Vexilor, now Supreme Commander of the Joint Defense Force, stood before the gathered crowd. His uniform bore both consortium and human insignia. 1 year ago today, he began, we faced extinction. The swarm came to devour all life in our sector. We would have fallen if not for our human allies. He gestured to the monument, where names were etched in various languages. Admiral Helena Chen led Strike Force Alpha directly into the heart of the swarm fleet. As her ships broke through to the swarm command vessel, Eliza Morty and Professor Tazral activated the resonator network from Senderi 4. Tazral sat in the front row, his arm still in a healing device. He had barely survived the swarm attack on the resonator station. Eliza had protected him long enough for reinforcements to arrive, though she had been severely wounded. The feedback loop created by the resonator network and Admiral Chen's strike disrupted the entire swarm consciousness. Vexilor continued. Their ships became disorganized, allowing our combined fleet to turn the tide of battle. Images appeared above the monument, showing the battle's final moments. The swarm command ship exploding. The remaining swarm vessels flying aimlessly, easy targets for the Allied fleet. Victory came at a great cost, Vexilor said solemnly. Strike Force Alpha was lost. Admiral Chen and her brave crew sacrificed themselves so that all of us might live. High Counselor Zivten stepped forward. Today, we honor that sacrifice by signing the United Worlds Accord. No longer will humans be just allies. They will be full members of our community. Captain Ramirez, now promoted to admiral and the new leader of human forces in the sector, signed the document alongside Zibtan. The crowd erupted in cheers. Later, as the celebration continued, Tazral and the recovered Eliza walked through the memorial garden outside the hall. "I finished my book," Tazral said. "The true history of humans and the consortium. No more legends or myths, just the truth." Eliza smiled. "What did you call it?" "They thought humans were legends," he replied. "It's already becoming the most read historical text in the consortium." They stopped before a statue of Admiral Chen. "She knew she wouldn't return," Eliza said quietly. "Before she left for the final battle, she told me, 'Legends aren't meant to live forever, Eliza. They're meant to inspire others to live better.'" In orbit above them, a new ship prepared for its maiden voyage. The UCS Horizon, the first vessel built jointly by human and consortium engineers. Its mission: to explore beyond their known space and establish an early warning network against any future threats. On its bridge, Admiral Ramirez stood beside Vexilor as the crew, a mix of humans and consortium species, prepared for departure. "Ready for the unknown?" Ramirez asked. Vexilor nodded. As Admiral Chen would say, "The stars call us onward." As the horizon jumped to faster-than-light speed, children in schools across consortium space and the new human colonies learned about the battle against the swarm. They heard stories of brave humans and their alien friends who fought side by side. No longer legends, but living history, shaping the shared future among the stars.